Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, senior steward for 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, master mason with Fort Worth 148. And we have a special guest today.
Chris Livingston, past master of Richardson Lodge number 1214 and Hillcrest Lodge number 1318.
Sweet. Glad to have you, Chris. We finally got this worked out.
Yeah, it's been a lot of excitement and fun, but here we are. So.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The road untraveled. Yeah, but we saw that, for our listeners, Chris posted a really interesting piece on the Texas Freemasons Facebook group, and we've been very interested in talking to him ever since we read that.
Yeah, that was on September 18th, too, to kind of make it easier to find. So it's almost been a month now, and we finally got it nailed down.
So before listening to this, if you are a member of the Texas Freemasons Facebook group, go there, and they have a search bar that you can type in, and just type in Christopher Livingston, and you should be able to find that using that September.
He posts a bunch, though.
Yeah,
that's right. I on occasion do happen to post things. I try not to get too controversial, though. Yeah, unlike some of my friends.
You're one of the heavier contributors there. So,
okay.
Well, and what I like about this one is there's it's well thought out. There's not a lot of controversy to it because you don't claim that this is the cure. These are just your thoughts, and right. I love the way it comes across.
Oh, but I love controversy, though.
Yep.
So do we want to jump into discussion questions real quick?
Let's get those knocked out.
All right. So the first question, this is something that I saw on Reddit, and Billy might have some insight into this, but the question was, I went to my local lodge for the first time yesterday. Going forwards, is it acceptable to ask if anyone in the lodge is into hermeticism, Golden Dawn teachings, and magic, with a K, right off the bat? So this is somebody who's very clearly interested in esoterics, occultism, that kind of stuff. So, Billy, how about you tackle this? Because you're a resident expert on this kind of stuff.
Well, so I'm not sure if I'd actually bring it up at your first meeting, right? Not right off the bat. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if in your lodge there are some brothers that are interested in some of the same topics. So I would just go on a regular basis, get to, know some of the brothers, and more importantly, let them get to know you before really jumping straight into those topics. Once you sit down, I'm sure you'll quickly find other brothers who their interests may lie along the same path as you do. But I think if you jump into it right off the bat, it may send up kind of alarm signals like, what kind of brother do we have now sitting among us?
Yeah.
You're right, because, that you're talking about the deep end of the pool, and there's a lot of Masons that aren't into that kind of thing.
Well, as somebody who is into a lot of these kind of studies and stuff on an academic sort of level, I would kind of be wary of somebody that popped in like that, just because it's kind of this idea of tampering with untempered mortar and all that jazz. I'm not opposed to any of it necessarily, but I would wonder if maybe if their interest in that is so strong, would they be better suited by finding maybe a Golden Dawn? What do they call them? Chapters? Lodges? I think it's a Golden Dawn Lodge, right? I don't know.
Well, yeah, and there's several groups that claim to be Golden Dawn, but they're all offshoots of the original group that went out of existence like
in the 70s, right? It was like the last true one was like in New Zealand, and it died off. And anyway, but yeah, so maybe practice some discretion if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, if someone popped into lodge in the very first day, they're like, "Hey, let's talk about Illuminati." I would, say, "Hey, you may want to, go somewhere else."
Relax, brother.
No, that's a great point. But if he were to wait a year or so, get his Masonic wings, he could meet up with Joseph Wages, who'll talk his ear off about it.
Right.
So you just bide your time. Don't run in with those controversial subjects. It's like walking into a woman's auxiliary meeting and go, hey, what do you think about abortion?
Yeah.
Use common sense,
Yeah,
it's like any
that might
other
be a little bit ballsy.
right?
Yeah. This also depends from lodge to lodge. In some lodges, you might find that this is a really super acceptable subject, and others you might find that it's not. Chris, in your experience, are your lodges more or less open to that kind of stuff?
It depends on which lodge you're talking about. So I think you're really talking about what lodge and what people you're dealing with. But I think it's a good rule of thumb that you don't walk in with that attitude or with those questions until you've had an opportunity to feel the guys out a little bit more, because their guys are interested in having those conversations, and they can be interesting, and other people can really turn them off.
That's exactly right. Wade into the pool. Don't jackknife into the deep end.
All right. So the second question that I had was a person that asked. That's a really weird way to phrase it. The second question that I have is a question that was asked to me in person as part of a conversation that I had at the School of Instruction for Chapter and Council this weekend. And somebody said, well, isn't York Rite the Christian side of Masonry? And while there are a lot of Christian elements to York Rite in Commandery, Chapter and Council, which are separate bodies in the York Rite, they are not Christian. They do not have a Christian requirement. One of the degrees uses a New Testament passage to open the Bible on, but that is pretty much it. You're not required to swear allegiance to Christianity or any of that jazz. Commandery, specifically the Order of Malta, the second order, is when you start to have a Christian requirement. So the York Rite has Christian elements, but it is not the quote-unquote Christian side of Masonry, although a lot of the invitationals, for example, are Christian.
Right.
So, but that was just a really quick one.
And I think, like Blue Lodge, York Rite really continues the story that you become familiar with in Blue Lodge, which that story is found in Judaism, Islam, as well as Christianity. So I wouldn't say it's exclusive that you must be Christian to be in York Rite. As you said, Gabe, that's really more commandery.
Yeah. So that's one of those things. If you're not Christian, don't feel like you can't join the York Rite. You can join the first two bodies, and those are very, very rich in storytelling and degree work. It's fantastic stuff. So, but let's move on to the main content for today.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So this episode we'll be talking with Brother Christopher Livingston, who's already introduced himself. And Chris, what do you want to call this piece of yours?
Somebody else listed it as changing Masonry in a changing world, or adapting Masonry to a changing world, or something along those lines. I've seen it. You get these people that want to post it other places, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I was throwing it out here. So,
okay. Well, let's call it changing Masonry in a changing world then.
Yeah.
That's a good description.
Yeah, so again, if y'all aren't familiar with Chris's essay, you can find it on the Texas Freemasons Facebook group. You'll probably also see it in other places picked up by other Masonic blogs. It's a very worthwhile read. It's a short essay, but it covers the full ground, and there's a lot of good talking points that get hit. So,
yeah, it definitely makes you think. Right from the opening, I think it's something that I kind of knew but never was aware of, where you make the point that the largest taxi service doesn't own a taxi, not one taxi being Uber. Same thing with Airbnb, not owning a hotel. Amazon is another example, no brick and mortar. And I mean, it's like, wow, that's right.
Yeah.
You know,
It's not really like any of this is real surprising. It's just, have you sat down and thought about this for a second?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, and it's right in front of your face. I don't know that anybody, people do articulate it, maybe not necessarily in the way that I did, but you know, this is where we are now, and obviously Freemasonry needs to adapt to that. Every organization does.
Yeah.
So,
No, and the successful ones are.
yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
and it struck me almost like, in a way, almost like a mini TED Talk or something that you find on LinkedIn, and that you can almost apply these to just about any organization to help bring it forward into the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that's obviously true. You know, I talk about going ahead and prioritizing, you know, the way that you're doing things, but also that you need a focus, a concrete purpose. And any organization is going to have that. It's just that concrete purpose for Masonry is obviously, you know, brotherly love, relief, and truth. And, you know, we talk a lot about the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the immortality of the soul. And if you're not taking those ideas and putting them into your Masonic lodge, then, you know, you're running something other than a Masonic lodge, but you can still use some of these other factors.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to ask if you thought that there was, like, when you made the point of Airbnb and Uber and all that, did you see a direct correlation to a change in Masonry, or was it just making those points that the world's changing at large?
I think there is a direct correlation in Freemasonry, and we have to realize that the Grand Lodge structure as it exists right now is continuing to operate as a 1950s or 1960s organization. And we have to understand that that's no longer where we are. You know, we're starting to make changes to our webpage by implementing some WordPress and implementing some minor changes, or what I think of as minor changes. But social media is where the entire world exists at this point. Any major business, which is Masonry is a major business, is adapting to that. They have Twitter feeds. They have their own social networks set up. They're active on Facebook. They may even create an internal Facebook or LinkedIn site that is exclusive to members of their community. In this case, you know, we could have an exclusive site for Freemasonry or for Grand Lodge of Texas, that would actually require that you be a member and a card-carrying dues member of a lodge. And it would be interesting. That would basically be tiled to better communicate. And you should be doing that on the Scottish Rite level, on the York Rite level, you know, each jurisdiction should have something like that set up.
No, I think you're absolutely right, because it kind of dawned on me the other day that, you know, while the website is important, it's kind of like the CD MP3 transition. You know, the websites are kind of going to the wayside. Everything's going to that smartphone.
Yeah, right.
And social media is so quick and easy. You got to have a good website. Don't get me wrong, but that social media and all that's so important.
Yeah, look, I mean, the website's just a building block at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to have that there so people can get information, but it's what you're doing with it. You need to make it interactive. It can't just be, you know, the blank page that we see for most of lodges, or, you know, for the lodges that do have websites. For most lodges, all it is this blank canvas that has when we meet. You know, what we've done at Hillcrest Lodge over the last year, and we've implemented changes over Richardson also, is it has become very interactive. The first thing that as a potential inquirer hits the website, they are pushed a pop-up, and the pop-up asks them, hey, are you interested in learning more? Are you interested in Freemasonry? If so, send us an email. And then, of course, at Hillcrest, we've got ways that we're tracking all that and tracking everything that we're doing. That's the stuff that we implemented last year when I was master. But we, we need to change. It needs to be updated, and social media is the way to do it.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's a good point where you mentioned tracking, because that's something that Kyle, when I talked to him, who's a member of your lodge as well, Kyle Walquist, he really drove it home with me how important that data is. Keeping it, tracking it, analyzing it. There's so much wisdom in it.
Yeah, and obviously Kyle was a fundamental force in drafting up how we're doing a lot of that. I mean, all the guys in the lodge are, I just happened to be the master at the time, but we've got everything tracked through HubSpot, and which is a free service, or at least the way that we're doing it, the way that any lodge would need it. It's HubSpot, and it's free, and we're tracking when guys are showing up to the socials, how many socials they've shown up, if they get an invite to the lodge for dinner, how many dinners they've showed up to, and you're tracking their progress. You're also tracking when they come in and they hit the website. You're tracking, okay, what is it that they're hitting on? What are they looking at? What are they reading? So we have a better idea of what type of communication we want to have with this guy, or what this guy's interested in communicating about, so that we can have an idea of whether or not he's a good fit for our lodge, if our lodge is a good fit for him.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have got to be doing that in these ages. I mean, that's kind of what I talked about in the article. You've got to have an outsider focus. You have to know what it is that these men are looking for, and whether or not you or your lodge can provide that, or whether they may be better off going to a different lodge.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
So, Chris, obviously we've all been seeing patterns and trends and things like that logically would lead those of us that kind of sit and meditate about it for a little while to the same conclusions that you came to. But what was kind of the tangible event that occurred that inspired you to write this piece?
Maybe too many long nights with Kyle Walquist at the bar. I don't know.
That's awesome.
It's just there wasn't any one particular event that really brought this out for me. I'm pretty active in Masonry. I think this was one of the ideas that I popped up with. I'm currently serving as the president for the 14th, the Dallas County MWSA. And as I'm going through and making motivational speeches and all that stuff, this is one of the ideas that popped in my head. And I was like, well, this one I probably ought to just, throw out on Facebook. So,
yeah. So I guess in a sentence, what could you say is the biggest problem that we've got right now? And I know that you were kind of aiming from a tech-based perspective, although I might be wrong in that interpretation.
Our organizational structure.
Organizational structure.
With Grand Lodge. I mean, we're still running, again, a 1970s, 1980s business in 2017. I mean, that is, and all of our lodges are doing the same thing. They're running a business as if it is 1980.
And when you say that, you mean like where we have to mail everything?
Well, it's not even that. You're not looking at how you're communicating. Yeah, it is the communication aspect, but it's also just, it's how you're trying to run your lodge. What are you trying to do? I constantly get the refrain from some of the older guys. Well, we need to get this in the newspaper. Like, dude, nobody reads the newspaper anymore.
Right. Yes, that's the truth.
It's like, there's a couple old guys who still get the paper. Everybody else is on the internet.
Yeah.
I can, yes, I look at New York Times and Dallas Morning News and Star Telegram. I go to those websites, but I'm not, an advertisement in the physical newspaper isn't going to help me or anybody in the demographic that we're trying to get in.
Yeah, I mean, of course, looking in the newspaper ties into your profession a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, I know for myself, I haven't touched a newspaper in years.
Right. Yeah.
If I have, it was for a specific article I knew right where to go to, or I was looking for somebody's obit. Otherwise, yeah, I'm looking on Facebook for some kind of advertisement or blogs or something different than the newspaper.
Right.
So
I get your point.
I want to tackle your first point of admission of a problem and a need. And you said that most lodges aren't going to revitalize because their leaders and members won't recognize that their lodges are in trouble. So there's two questions I have on that point. Do you think that these lodges will demise, merge, simply continue on some sort of crippled state? And how long do you think it'll be until we see that occur on a undeniable level?
I think the lodges are going to fail, and it's just a question of how that failure occurs. And it can be done in a successful way. You can, there's some lodges that have consolidated, and the consolidation has occurred in such a way that the two lodges are actually made stronger. Whether that be because one has an active membership and the other one has some physical or monetary assets, and those two lodges come together and, wind up stronger as a whole. But what I'm thinking is if you're not revitalizing, if you're not making the changes that you need to make, your lodge will slowly die. And that death is probably going to occur in the next 15 to 20 years. And when the end comes, it's going to be quick because we are having a generational changeover here. We are having a situation where we have all of our leadership is much, much older than the gentlemen and the men who are coming in to Masonry. And what there's going to be is there's just going to be at some time when those deaths accumulate, when the baby boomer generation moves on, there's just going to be a sea change in what's going on. And my real concern, and I think there are a number of leaders who recognize this, but my real concern is as we continue to use or keep leadership keep leadership populated by baby boomers without bringing in younger guys into invitational bodies, into leadership roles in the Grand Lodge, we're going to wind up with a bunch of people who suddenly become leaders and don't understand or don't have an appreciation for the way that things have historically been done and the way, some of the useful things, some of the useful teaching have a possibility of disappearing. And I don't think a lot of baby boomers appreciate that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. A good example is I helped a past master of our lodge draft a resolution for Grand Lodge. And you get down there and you start seeing all the backroom activity that's going on that young guys are totally missing out on because they have no part in the leadership. And it's so crucial, if nothing else, just for them to be a fly on a wall to see the professionalism and how quick things are getting done for such important thing as our Grand Lodge law.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a real eye-opening experience for me that was like, oh, wow, this is how the sausage is made.
Right. And that is something that each one of us, each one of these younger leaders needs to be a part of so they can see, all right, this is how it has worked out, especially in something like Grand Lodge legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, something that we're just not really exposed to on a day-to-day, but you run the same thing in a lodge. Well, you don't just throw a guy in to become master. He needs to see how it is done for a few years, come in and be useful in the immediate way that you should be master, but also be allowed to make some innovations. But if he hasn't seen how it's done in the first place, he's going to be lost.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been to a few different committee meetings, and it's just really eye-opening how 12 men come to a consensus on anything. It's a really unique position to be able to observe that. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
One of the things that caught my attention was when you said that replacing leadership in invitational bodies. And I know that in a large sense, for most Masons, invitational bodies don't really affect their day-to-day Masonry. But there is a lot of really cool Masonry that's kind of locked away in the invitational bodies, like AMD and Red Cross of Constantine and other bodies like that. But you look at the grand body websites and stuff, and you see who's involved, and a lot of times they do seem to be kind of reserved for Masons who have really put in the time, and it's seen as kind of a reward, which that in of itself is maybe not a bad thing, but because of that, you see it tends to be older leadership primarily that gets involved. What do you think that, I guess two questions on this. What do you think will be the consequences of the invitational bodies starting to die off? And how do you think we should prevent that? Because the nature of invitational bodies is a little bit different from everything else.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate to be a member of several invitational bodies, and the lessons that I see in some of those are absolutely phenomenal. And, just a couple of them in particular are really good lessons. You're losing the opportunity with those invitational bodies if you're not bringing young leaders in. You're missing the opportunity to better meet those guys, better understand them, and to mentor them better. And that's, again, that's what you're losing out by handing it off, giving an invitation to Jim Bob, who's been a Mason for 40 years and happens to be 75 and hasn't necessarily, he served his time, but he's not necessarily a leader. He's a guy who's served his time and always been a good Mason. And so you're bringing him in so he can get this little extra thing, when what you should be doing is what it started out as, the guys that are really movers and shakers and are leaders are having an opportunity to meet and get mentored by the other guys who are strong leaders.
No, I think that's such a great point of bringing young leadership in, because, if we look back, it's not hard to see that with the leadership we've had, they keep trying to repackage the same schemes, I guess, to fix our membership. And, everybody's got their own little twist on it, but they're ultimately pretty much the same, and they're just not working. And, when I attend these meetings, I hear the millennials they want it now. They're too busy on Facebook. And while I'm sure there's some are, the millennials that are coming to our lodge, they want to go deep, and if they had a handful of them in there expressing that, it could very well change ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and one of the things that I've kind of experienced as a millennial is that a lot of times that people will either not ask and this happened at the School of Instruction for the York Rite that I was at this weekend. I went to a practice for the Royal Arch degree. We did opening and closing, and we were supposed to practice the degree itself, and then didn't do anything other than opening and closing. And the rest of the time, practice time, was spent complaining about membership and what do millennials want? How do we reach them? I was the only millennial in the room, and not a single person turned around and asked me a question until James Kirkpatrick pointed at me, and he was like, well, we got one here.
Right.
And even then it was already too late, It was because we were kind of closing up and we had to go to the next session. One of the, it was just kind of an interesting thing. So I've had that experience where either nobody turns around or people will ask me my opinion. Well, what do you think millennials want to see? And I get asked my opinion and I give it. And I like to think that I'm eloquent and polite in the way I give my opinions, but then it gets either totally ignored or I get told, well, that's just, we can't do that. And I'm just going, I feel like I'm being pretty reasonable.
We've never done it that way.
Yeah. And so just one of those things that as a younger guy involved in the fraternity, sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind because I'm saying like, hey, like I've got fairly reasonable ideas. I'm not asking to change everything, but there are some things that we need to change. And everybody goes, oh no. So.
Yeah, and let me point something else out is, just asking you what you want isn't necessarily the right way to go about that either.
Oh,
because how do we know that you are representative of all of the millennials and the way that they want to do things?
And I'm really not.
What we really need to do is we need to sit down and we need to do a survey, a professional survey, where it's targeted at the demographic that we're looking for, maybe, 25 to 35-year-olds, and, get a survey sent out. Do you know what Freemasonry is? What, if you were going to join a club, what kind of club would you join? That type of thing, and have some hard numbers for us to react to, rather than constantly going, well, this is the way we've always done it, and if we just throw out another program, people will come join us, or, well, here's the millennial over here, if we just him no.
Well, and to a certain extent, I feel like we may have already missed the boat with millennials. We need to be looking at Generation Alpha now.
Yeah, right, and you could be right. I think that we still have an opportunity to capture Gen Xers and millennials and everybody else. It's just a matter of really getting ourselves known in the world. I mean, you got to remember back in the 20s when Sam Cochran was running things, or in the teens, guys were joining Masonry, but Masons were building the cathedral downtown. They were setting up the hospital. We were doing things. Today, we don't even spend enough money to keep those buildings afloat. And, it's just, we're doing the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. We need to be building impressive buildings that make it look like we are an exclusive association that are helping other people and doing and practicing all of the tenets of Freemasonry. And sitting down and saying, well, if you'll pay $120 or $25 a year for dues and purchase an endowed membership for $500, everything will be hunky-dory, is just not working.
Right. The one of the things that you kind of talked about was the for you, your bullet point was prioritizing a for you, not from you culture. And I think we're really hitting on a lot of these points of the from you, for you difference here. And, when primarily what you're talking about there is recruiting, right? And talking about, we need membership and everything like that. And that's kind of the for you, or I guess, sorry, the from you culture. How have you seen the from you culture like tangibly negatively impact the craft?
Well, again, I think we've already hit on it. Like you said, we have an organization with these invitational bodies where we're not grooming the new guys to become leaders. We're keeping them out. We're running the same thing where we've got guys that are coming in to lodges, and what do you need, or what do you want to get out of Freemasonry? I'd like to get some education, maybe a leadership experience. These things that are fundamentally part of making yourself a better man that we aren't providing, that we need to be providing. When that includes education at every Masonic education, not education about, I don't know. Sometimes I go to meetings and they're making a presentation on some guy who is, runs an insurance business and, why you need to buy life insurance. Okay, thanks. But I'd like to have a meeting about some sort of Masonic element. Maybe in a Master Masons meeting, and we will go in depth into the Hiramic legend.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. When we're running young guys through the chairs, you don't just throw them into the chairs. They need to serve a couple years in some of the lower chairs, and they need to see what a good leader is doing, like creating a plan for the year, appropriately delegating things to various officers in the line, making sure that there's some sort of program. If you're running a blood drive, it should not always be run by the one guy who does the blood drives and has for the past 20 years. That guy needs to have a couple of assistants, preferably younger guys who are learning how to do that, and maybe contribute with some sort of idea of what some better ideas might be to get more people out to your blood drive, and also be equipped so that when our older member is no longer able to run the blood drive, you've got some continuity where somebody else can step in and do that. And we're really, in large part, what I see across Freemasonry from having gone to multiple lodges, we're just failing in that.
No, and the funny thing when I was reading it, that it's from my experience, from what I've actually been a part of, and from what I've seen, is that the, from you culture will suck the life out, but the, for you culture will not only take care of those money problems, time problems, because you'll have people volunteering. It fixes all those problems that could be created by the from you culture. So, it's crucial. You start building those things, and then those other problems, like dues, will take care of themselves.
One of the scariest things I've ever encountered, and that I keep encountering, is when we get new guys coming to check out lodges and stuff like that. A lot of guys that they talk to will immediately start jumping in and talk about, oh, yeah, well, our membership is dying. It's good that younger kids are interested in this. And I'm just going, man, are you trying to kill the experience for him preemptively? Like, what are you doing, dude?
Thanks for that pep talk. Let's move on.
Sounds great. That's awesome.
The last thing you want to hear is fresh blood,
Right.
Yeah.
It's like buying a car. Well, that transmission's on its last leg, but glad a young guy. You can work
exactly.
on
It's
it.
like buying a crappy used car.
That's funny.
When it comes to decision making, because we're talking about guys having to learn leadership skills and everything like that. So obviously decision making is one of those things that we got to look at, teaching younger guys and or guys that are newer to the craft in general, regardless of age. You mentioned that web designers have half a second to make impressions on visitors when you were illustrating the importance of quick decision making. I know your angle was primarily tech-based in nature, but how would you translate that to in-person interactions?
Well, an in-person interaction, we need to be handling things through committees. Lodges should be operating. This is a volunteer organization. Nobody owns the lodge. you get the opportunity to sit in the East, that's not your year. That is the year that you're serving in the East. And we need to make sure that we're having votes in front of the lodge and that the lodge is buying into things. And at the same time, when something pops up, I guess my example that most recently that came up was in the MWSA, where we saw what was going on with the hurricane. And, immediately I sent out an email to our office. Okay, we need to do something because this is going to devastate, South Texas. What can we do? And, all right, well, we can, get some water bottles and, raise some money and funds to send water down south, and then all additional contribute and provide relief. All right, well, let's do that. Send something out on the internet and send it out to our Google group and also through MailChimp. Make some pleas. And once you've got those funds, okay, now we're going to purchase the water over here. We've got this extra money left over. What are we going to do with it? Here's a couple ideas. We've got a meeting coming up next week. Can we wait to present that to the association, or do we need to pull the trigger now? We can wait and put it in front of the association. Did that. And, it's some things you can take time with, other things need immediate responses, and people are placed in leadership positions so they can make those immediate decisions. If you're having a flood at your lodge, right? Obviously, the officers need to get together. We can't just have one guy do something, but the officers need to have the authority to get together, say, get the plumber out there, and yes, let's pay him, and go back to the lodge for confirmation, and if you explain the situation and so on, but he's toward, I think, the lodge is going to understand that. But you always have that in the back of your mind. Okay, whatever I'm doing, I need approval from the body. So what seems like the most reasonable thing that the body will approve? And do I have time to wait to make a decision and make an actual formal vote of a lodge or the association or the chapter or the council, whoever?
Well, and it seems to me that kind of goes back to what you were saying about preparing some of the leaders of tomorrow, right? So succession grooming, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Helping brothers learn when they need to move quickly and not, you can't do, if you're flooding, you can't do committee where I propose we do something about the flooding 1 month. Next month, the committee reports. The third month, we actually do something about it. I think that really does go back to what you were talking about, the experience of bringing in the new people and training them to be the leaders of the lodge for tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, every once in a while, you get somebody who gets in a leadership position who becomes too heavy-handed. They think, okay, well, we're doing it this way. The master has all the authority. Here's what we're doing. And we're like, okay, but you have to understand that this is a volunteer organization. And you can't just do things. Part of your leadership experience is getting buy-in from your members. And if you lose that point, you lose your lodge. And it's a delicate thing to learn. But it's something that can be learned. And it's just a matter of going through and being properly mentored to do that.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot of ways lodges can streamline that decision-making process. I think you briefly mentioned committees, and that, even though a lot of lodges have committees for things, I don't think they're used as properly as they should be. While they're not the in say in everything, they should carry the most weight.
Yeah, I've been to several committee meetings during lodge.
Yeah.
Don't need to happen. It's like, okay, we've got a committee for this. Why are we having an open discussion in the lodge talking about some topic for 45 minutes that a committee could have sat down if they'd been doing their job and said, okay, here's our 3 options. Which one does the lodge want to go with?
That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
And then they could answer questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of our friends and listeners, and I won't say his name, but he was telling us about a relatively new brother. And if you hear the story, you know who you are, because I'm not giving any details. But he said, yeah, so this new brother went to he got his EA degree, and he went to his first stated meeting, and they argued about giving somebody $2. And apparently it was a long, drawn out argument.
Those things I probably just stood up. Here's the $2. Let's give it to him.
Guaranteed I would.
And that's what he said. He said he was telling the guy that relayed this to me. He was telling him, man, if I had, if I hadn't been so new, I would have given them the $2 so they could give it to him. And I think that's what it was. I think or if he had the $2 on him or something like that, but he wanted to give them the $2. But what a terrifying, terrible, and just bitter sort of experience for somebody that's brand new to the craft, right? Where you have to maybe sit through a committee meeting in a stated meeting, or if you have an argument about the bills or whatever. It's just horrible.
Well, we're going to take over times.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good example.
I can't wait to ruin things for a couple of generations down from me.
Right.
No, I mean, those guys just don't understand how devastating those conversations are. They've literally thrown the compasses out the window, and that issue seems important to them for some reason, which I could guess it's ego. It's just so disheartening to those new guys around them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather be watching The Bachelor than watching somebody argue over $2.
Personally, I don't like the idea in the way that I've practiced everything. I don't let EAs and fellow crafts proficiency. Those stated meetings are for master masons. I mean, I'll bring them in. We'll set aside time for education that is directed towards EAs and directed towards fellow crafts. But I like to keep a little bit of the mystery. And I don't know, we had a couple of the guys that we ran through last year who, one of them, told me as soon as raised him, he was like, this is awesome. Now I can go to a stated meeting. I'm like, yes, that's what I'm going for. You want to go to a stated meeting because you don't have exactly an idea of what it is, but you know that it's secret. And we've got to have some of that secrecy in place.
Yeah,
that's true. Although to a certain extent, I'm kind of wary of that approach. Well, now there's nothing wrong with that approach.
Right.
I think there's a lot of value to doing it that way. But one of the things that makes me wary about that approach is that they get to the meeting and it is just business. So
right, you can't be doing just business at the stated.
Yeah,
because that's awful.
That's one of the things that we've been struggling to change. So
and I think your business meeting also, if it is just business, can still be impressive if it's run with a decorum you don't see every day.
That's
because we don't follow Robert rules exactly, but we're pretty darn close. And if it's pulled off correctly, it creates it's like, wow. I mean, this was a business meeting, but not like at your work.
Right.
It's still a unique experience because, some business meetings, the stateds can go long where you have just a little time for education that night, but you can still make it impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, that's another leadership element. When you come into the East, you should know how to run a business meeting. And a properly performed business meeting, it can still be impressive. You've kept everything, you've moved it along, you've gotten things accomplished during the evening, and now you're ready to go out for some.
So one of the things I wanted to hit on was your point, innovation and flexibility. I got two questions, but we'll give them one at a time. First question I had about innovation and flexibility. What are some ideas that you've tried, either as a member of your lodge or as worshipful master, that haven't worked out?
Everything I do works out. No.
I like the confidence.
Yeah, right. Often wrong, never in doubt. What have we done? It hasn't worked as well. Well, a lot of it usually is related to personalities. Sometimes you give people some, George Patton, General George Patton's the one who never tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity, right? But sometimes you tell people what to do and something gets lost in the translation as a leader, to properly set expectations, or giving them the full information. Maybe you made some assumptions on your part, and I'm definitely guilty of doing that a couple times. But most of the stuff that we have done, I think, has been successful. Whether that's being, sending things out through MailChimp, setting up education nights for your masters and for your fellow crafts and for your EA. So I think most of the stuff that I've done has worked out. It's just, sometimes you make some mistakes and, don't communicate as well as you like.
Yeah.
And, you learn from that and you move on and make sure you don't make the mistake the next time.
Mm. What would you say was the most successful thing that you tried, that you might recommend to every lodge?
I think one of the things that's been extremely successful for us, definitely at Hillcrest, has been the implementation of the social night, which we do monthly. And we invite inquirers to come to the social event, which is in a public place. And one of the reasons we do that is because we have inquirers, a lot of whom are coming to us from the internet. We don't want them to show up to our lodge for basically some safety concerns. We get the guys who are contacting us that are not approaching Masonry for the right reason. We get guys that are, think we're part of the Illuminati and they want to learn the mind control. And we can clear those guys off by talking to them and interacting with them on the internet and through email. But then there's some guys that are not a fit for our lodge, but once we bring them out into a social situation, we can kind of sift through them and have a better idea of who it is there that you now want to bring down to your lodge for a stated meeting dinner. And I guess on top of that, one of the things that's worked out well is being exclusive. We're charging $300 for our EA degree. It's $300, $200, $200. We have not had a drop off in the number of people who are petitioning. In fact, we, through all the changes, but I think what guys are looking for is some more exclusive. And if you're providing, I hate to say it this way, but if you're providing a good product, which Freemasonry is really an excellent product, if it's done right, they'll pay for it. And that's not to say that we haven't on occasion provided scholarship for certain guys that were like, this is a good guy. And, he's not going to be able to make, the full 300 right now, but, he might give it to us later in the line. And we can tell that, and that's because of his job situation or whatever it is. But, we can spot you a little bit of money there.
I think that's a great point to make when you're talking about exclusivity, because we're not talking about excluding people based on external things.
Right.
We're talking about those people that are go-getters, that are good men that want to leave society better than when they got here.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. And if you base that on a lodge, you're going to have a variety of men and a variety of professions.
Yeah. Both my grandfathers were Masons. One of them was a bookkeeper and a union guy, and was never real wealthy. And the other one was a vice president with his company and was also a vice president at a bank. And both of those guys were in lodge together, and they saw eye to eye, and they were friends and met on the level. And that's the way it should be. And therefore, if you have a person, or if you have a man is going to be a good Mason, and you can tell that, just from interacting. And I firmly believe that most of the time you can, especially if you've done a proper investigation and you're not just signing petitions because some guy walked up with one. Then who you should be letting in your lodge. And those are the guys that you want, not that want to be with you, but not only want to be with you, but you want them.
Yeah.
Because of who they are, not because
then that's crucial, because, man, if you let somebody in that starts disrupting the peace and harmony that you've had or created, it could be game over.
And
Absolutely.
and we've had that, and I don't think we've really had that to the extent where it's been totally disruptive to the lodge, but it gets difficult sometimes because you have, sometimes you have some brothers that disrupt the peace a little bit, and you just every meeting you wonder, well, is so and so going to show up to this one, and if so, what's going to happen? What's going to happen now?
Key point, and Chris has already touched on it, is that it's internal things you're looking for, because they may think some crucial issues different than you, in certain areas such as politics or religion, but at the same time you see through all that into the his heart, because you to quote another patent quote, if we're all thinking alike, nobody's thinking. So you want different minded people in lodge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And innovation comes from that, from people with different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
If you if you just get into groupthink, you're not necessarily making the best decisions.
Yeah, and that's why I understand the word exclusive is such a lightning rod, and people immediately get turned off. It's like, whoa, like we're talking about Joe the plumber can't be a Mason, and we couldn't be anything further from the truth. We're talking about a specific kind of exclusivity.
It's all based on the internal.
Exactly. All the ways we're judging a man is specifically taught to us in our ritual.
Yeah.
Does he exhibit brotherly love, relief, and truth? I don't care if he voted for Bush or Reagan.
So another one of the points you said is that we have to value online relationships as real relationships. We've already kind of touched on that pretty heavily. Assuming that not having any social media presence is the worst case scenario, or that having only a stagnant website from GeoCities is the worst case scenario, what are the most common mistakes that you see lodges making when they do have some level of Facebook or social media presence? So let's say they have an active website that responds, they have a Facebook page, they maybe even a Twitter page, whatever. they have all the groundwork there. What are the mistakes that you see a lot of lodges making in that case?
I don't think they're not optimizing their websites. They're not communicating through Facebook to the world. They create closed groups. When they have events, they don't use those resources to share information properly. So, for instance, a website. Okay, a website's great if you've got it there, but if you're not adding content to it on a weekly or a monthly basis, you're not using the tool properly. And your content can be as simple as having everybody take it, have a picture taken at the end of stated meeting and popping that on your website and setting it up as a blog or something and sticking it on Facebook. I see those things get updated, but then almost lay dormant for a month until the next new slate of officers comes in.
Right.
Or the other thing that I see a lot of run up several times is you've got the one guy webmaster, whatever that means, since it doesn't really exist anymore, but who has all the passwords and everything, and then he moves on how to do any website. We need a couple people who can update things. That adds to it too. If you can have a couple people who can contribute and post things, not the whole lodge, but a couple people.
So, do you have any advice on for lodges on where to get started with social media? And given kind of what we've talked about, like let's say ground
Facebook.
zero.
Ground zero is setting up a Facebook page and getting all of your members on Facebook and getting all of them to like the page, and then getting them to share on their pages events that pop up on your Facebook page. I mean, simple thing to do. Really not that hard.
No, I know one night I did a short presentation on social media and had everybody pull out their phones and check in.
Yeah, right.
And we had 3 friends. They didn't petition our lodge, but we had friends of guys in lodge there end up petitioning from all of us checking in that night.
Yeah, right.
So simple.
Right. And while you're doing that, make sure that on Google Maps, you got your address and located there so it can be pinged, and then also get your guys to write a review of the lodge, because those are things that help with optimization on Google.
Absolutely.
Hard to realize how many people I've got my web page and I've got my Facebook page, but I don't have my address into Google Maps.
Right.
It's a truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another one of the things that I wanted to talk about is another one of your points is a tailored experience, not a tailored message. So if tailoring the experience is a positive thing to do, where you take your candidate into account and all that, what do you see in what I guess you could call off the rack masonry or poorly tailored masonry?
Yeah, your poorly tailored masonry is just the guys who run through the degrees, hand out petitions, who every one body that they see, and just provide kind of a perfunctory set of check marks that they're going off of. Other lodges, and let me call out a couple here. Knox Corinthian does a phenomenal golf tournament every year, and so they're drawing guys to their lodge interested in golf and in putting on a fundraiser, and half that money goes to Texas Scottish Rite Hospital, and the rest goes over to the Scottish Rite Library. and they raise great money. It's an awesome golf tournament. But okay, so there's a charity focused lodge. Jewel P. Lightfoot, they're trying to do we're doing your traditional observance lodge. Okay, so they're drawing guys, their traditional observance stuff. Probably they're not doing a lot of charity or anything. You've got Hillcrest Lodge that's trying to kind of run a little bit more of a gamut like that, where we're addressing a lot of those things. We're addressing education. It's meaning we adopt a nursing home over in Oak Cliff that we provided $1,500 worth of supplies for Christmas. Give some stuff, toiletries and stuff during the course of and we are trying really hard to raise up the level of our ritual. And part of that was, redoing the lodge room and creating that type of a presence in that lodge. But, so you want to tailor the experience when you're bringing guys in, because, okay, maybe this guy is a lot more interested in operating a charity or participating in charitable activities, and so he might be a better fit for a lodge that is focused on that and is not as concerned about the ritual. But you still have to be doing the ritual. You still have to be doing your proficiency. Otherwise, not a Mason, not Freemasons. But there might be things that you want to emphasize with people. You might have a lodge that's emphasizing, and what you're trying to do is make sure guys are going through leadership programs and are learning how to run the lodge, and therefore guys sticking them on committees and seeing how that committee is run, and that committee meets on a regular basis. You can have things along those lines. But you've got to know who to lodge. You can't just, and you can't necessarily be everything. You want to try to be as much of it, but you're always going to have something that you start off with as a foundation, and you say, this is what we do real well right now. Okay, exploit that. Make sure that you're doing the best that you possibly can in that area, and then build upon it. But don't ever sit around and check boxes,
No, and I like the point of checking boxes, because it's something I've thought a lot about. How did we get in this position that we're in now, to where, the investigation is the best example, to where Grand Lodge gives us a form, we
Right.
fill it out, turn it in, and we think we're done.
Yeah.
And I, from my research, I see that would have worked perfectly in the 20s to 50s, probably 60s, to where, you didn't have a lot of people relocating because of jobs. You moved to a city, you stayed there. So somebody in Dallas is going to know you, going to know your grandfather, your dad. They'll know right from the get-go, oh, yeah, that's Jimmy Jobs' boy. He's not getting in.
Right.
So the investigation process was just done through a community sense, by and large. On the majority it was. And again, the largest taxi company doesn't own a car. Things have changed drastically.
Yeah.
And, we got to figure that process out, because I think guys are actually looking for that treasure hunt. They don't want to stumble upon it. They want to dig a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been my, guys are really looking for it. And I mean, when they come to Hillcrest, we're encouraging them, hey, don't just check us out, check some of these other lodges out. You fit in someplace better. Because there are different emphasis in different parts of Masonry, and different lodges do different things. But with regard to those investigations, there's actually a pretty good handbook from the Grand Lodge on how to do the investigation. And I encourage everybody to look through that and run a program at your lodge. We almost ought to have an education program where you are taught how to investigate before you go out there and actually do it. Although then you'll probably have some people who just don't take the program, so they don't have to go investigate. So that doesn't really work.
Well, and there's two sides of that coin, because ultimately, I don't know that if that guy's not going to take the time to learn how to do it properly, because I would take that class and I think I'm pretty good at it. I don't want him investigating. So,
right.
You know, maybe that's a way of weeding out, you know, because it is one of the most important duties we have as a Mason, and we take it so lightly. I mean, we had a guy that's been coming to our lodge for over 6 months, and another lodge was visiting, and they said, well, here, got pulled out a petition, and they signed where they could and said, give that to them and tell them you're ready. It's like, man, you know.
Right. Yeah.
We got a process to this. We're not in a hurry.
Right. Yeah, we're definitely not in a hurry.
You know, and that's poaching people is kind of.
Well, they weren't poaching. Oh. It was, they were saying to bring it to us, you know, like, hey, we'll vouch for you. And they met him that night. And I'm not pointing fingers. That's the thing. People get so defensive when you talk about this, because I realized it did work for so long according to social norms. But things are different now. People live in a city 2 or 3 years, and then they're gone to another one, because you don't work for the same company for long periods anymore. So things are totally different. To where that investigation process has got to change. I mean, that is a no-brainer if you sit down and think about it for a second. And we're not changing the tenets, you know.
Yeah, and when you're doing that, I mean, sign that thing to say that you're going to be a reference. I mean, you're saying that this is a guy that you would want to be a brother with. Okay, well, if you just met him 15 minutes ago, how do you know that?
Right.
You can't. You got to let your gut marinate on it. And, you know, there's so many aspects to making them wait for that petition. I say that to getting to know them, because it's building value in their journey. Of course, they're excited to get started. But in the end, when they look back on their journey, if it was a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, they can walk away from that easy. But, you know, if it took some time for them to earn that whole process and the title of master, they're going to dig in. They're going to own it.
Well, and I think it's great that your lodge actually advises people to check in with other lodges, because I think that's really important too, because not all lodges operate the same. They don't focus on the same aspects of Masonry. So if a potential brother can kind of shop around and find the group that he really clicks with, I think you have a better chance of that person being a lifelong Mason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and what you find, because we do that from time to time as well, is that it creates that illusion of exclusivity that they're like drawn to, like moths to the light, you know? It's like, wait a minute, they're acting like they don't even need me. That what's going on over there? This other one said, thank God you're here. We're dying. And it's got some illusion to it. There's something to that.
Yeah, and you really can, though. I mean, every lodge has its own personality, and some people just, you know, fit better. I mean, I've had guys who I've, you know, been at Hillcrest with, and I've, you know, started talking to them. I was like, you need to go check out Richardson. I've done the same thing at Richardson. Yeah, you need to go check over here at Hillcrest, because each of those lodges has different strengths and different personalities, and that's the most important thing, is making sure that you wind up that you're going to be a good fit with, because otherwise you're right, you're not going to stick around. You're going to get bored if you're not making best friends in your whole life at this lodge. You're doing something wrong.
That's a good way to put it. Because that's a good point. We've got brothers, they're a dime a dozen, but if you're not creating those bonds that, like you said, best friends, you are at the wrong lodge.
Yeah.
There's somebody out there. Well, that was point 10, wasn't it, Gabe?
Yeah, pretty much. I guess kind of in closing, Chris, what is your hope for those that read your essay?
I think I hope that they go ahead and sit back and look at these things a little bit and maybe make some changes in logic. And you don't necessarily need to try to do that on your own. You can have a couple people look at all of these points. I think they're all valid. And I'm not trying to shove something down your throat telling you this is the way that you have to do it. These are general overarching principles that anybody can read through and say, okay, if I'm looking at my lodge and I wanted to implement these 10 principles, how would I do it for my lodge? And I think everybody can do that. And hopefully Masonry can be stronger in Texas and throughout the world for doing that. I forgot to mention at the start that I was senior warden of the Texas Lodge of Research paper.
Nice. That'd be a good one. Develop it into one.
Yeah. These are just thoughts coming out. I'm just pontificating. So,
hey, sometimes we need
Texas Lodge of Research requires research.
Yeah, it's not Texas Lodge of Pontification.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's great. That's a good way to put it.
So this week's Fraternal Quote of the Week is, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew victory nor defeat." That's by Brother Theodore Roosevelt, 26th President of the United States, in an excerpt from his 1910 speech, Citizenship in a Republic. And I thought that was a really appropriate quote because, Chris, you're talking about these points, and you've implemented a lot of this in your lodges, and you're very active in the Masonic community here in North Texas. So you are one of these guys that is in the arena. And, your face is marred by dust and sweat, and hopefully not blood, but you certainly strive valiantly. So when I read your points, and I've seen your involvement in MWSA, and I saw this feels right. So,
yep.
But I appreciate it. It was great talking.
It's great talking with you guys. Yeah,
if you want to.
Guys, we'll save Chris for the best for last. But do you guys have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first read this, what I loved about it is that it cut to the core of issues. There was no talk about certain dress codes or that lodges need to raise dues. It cut to the core of issues and had some real, wisdom in it to contemplate over. Because whether you're that country lodge, that technology is just not going to happen anytime this year, or in the next 10 years. There are things in this paper that you can contemplate on and implement. It's talking about the reverse of raising. There's other things to focus on besides those divisive issues that everybody thinks, if you want to fix your lodge, everybody should wear suits. There's bigger things to get into, and this paper kind of cuts to those issues. So get online and check it out.
Billy, how about you?
So this is actually timely because I've been in a lot of discussions lately about what do we do to rebuild rebuild Masonry? How do we stop the decline of the craft? I think the one common thread throughout Brother Livingston's 10 points is that it really is upon each one of us, including members of the lodge, but especially officers, to really make the changes and be the change that we want to see to help push us into the future.
Well, you bing, hit the bell, man. We got to work.
And so my kind of takeaway from this is it's kind of a larger trend that I've been seeing, whether it's with Brother Chris's essay or Lance's essay from a couple months back, and a bunch of other discussions that have been going on, is that lately it seems like the Masonic internet sphere has been kind of on fire with a lot of really good, useful discussions by guys that are getting involved and changing things. And it fills me with a lot of optimism, because I'm in the camp where maybe we're not in as much trouble as we think we are. But even if we're not in as much trouble as we think we are, we lose nothing. We can only gain by implementing the practices that guys like Chris are talking about, because this essay was filled with amazing advice, and we don't lose anything if we implement these ideas. We can only improve. So it's cool to see these ideas, because the only way to go up, the only way to go from here is up. So, but
that's the truth.
Brother Chris, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience?
Let me say it this way. Freemasonry is an amazing thing. And if anybody's ever read the story about January 1st of 1863, when the Confederate forces attacked the Union forces occupying Galveston, everything that came out of that, and the sinking of the USS Harriet Lane, and what Harmony Lodge number 6 did the following day when they opened a lodge of emergency, when these Confederate soldiers opened a lodge of emergency to bury a Union commander. You have to realize that Masonry transcends violence. It transcends everything that we're part of. We're making Masons when we tie these mystic bonds of brotherhood. And that is what we are selling to the world, to other men. It's something that Texas desperately needs, something that America desperately needs. It's something that, as Teddy Roosevelt explained, recognizes of necessity both the need of self-help and also the need of helping others. And those are the things that we need to be telling prospective members. Freemasonry is a brotherhood, and that we're building upon the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the immortality of the soul, a temple that transcends this world, and it transcends you, it transcends me. And this is the greatest fraternity ever. And if you can just implement some of these policies, if you can just think about that, and think about what you're selling, and give what is really a gift to your friends when you invite them or have them come into your lodge and into your life, it'll be a better place. And Freemasonry will survive.
That's sweetness. We just need background video with that. We could make our first marketing message right there.
Yeah. Just call up Grand Lodge and we'll say, "Hey man, we know a guy with a great narrator's voice, and his message kicks ass."
No, it's great to kind of compare it to a gift, because that's what it should be. It should be like something we're giving to him that he's not given to us, which is where the state of affairs we're in. Oh, thank goodness you're here. You can pay dues.
Right.
You're not a 50-year member.
No, again, it's a prioritizing a for you, not from you culture.
Yeah, that was a great point.
Yeah.
Well, I know I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and now that we've kind of worked out the kinks on the Discord, maybe the next podcast will be easier, because we're going to have to do this again.
Sounds good to me.
For sure.
All right, this is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabriel Jagush signing off.
This is Chris Livingston signing off.